The Ellen DeGeneres Show studio buzzed with its trademark energy that Tuesday morning. Bright California sunshine streamed through the windows as audience members settled into their seats, phones buzzing with excitement about the day's special guest. Tasha Nguyen, the audience producer, worked the crowd with practiced enthusiasm, her hands gesturing for bigger applause as the cameras prepared to roll. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Meghan Markle," Ellen's voice boomed across the studio. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Meghan emerged from backstage in a cream-colored blazer that caught the studio lights perfectly, her smile radiant and camera-ready. The audience erupted in cheers, some standing, others whistling. She waved gracefully, settling into the guest chair with the poise of someone who'd mastered the art of public appearances. "Look at you, California girl," Ellen beamed, her trademark grin wide and welcoming. "Back on the West Coast? Back on a talk show? How does it feel?" "It feels wonderful," Meghan replied, her voice warm and measured. "There's something about being home that just centers you, you know?" The conversation flowed like honey. Ellen asked about Meghan's latest advocacy work, her new lifestyle brand, her thoughts on living authentically. Meghan answered with quotable sound bites about empowerment and finding your voice, each response polished but seemingly heartfelt. From the control booth, Jake Morales watched the monitors with satisfaction. The mood was exactly where it needed to be, comfortable, trusting, unguarded. "Now," Ellen said, leaning forward with that mischievous glint her regular viewers knew so well, "we've got a special surprise for you today. We've been doing some digging into your pre-royal days, and let me tell you, we found some gems." Meghan's smile flickered for just a microsecond, but she recovered quickly. "Oh no, should I be worried?" The studio erupted in knowing laughter as Ellen pulled out a stack of photos. "Let's start with these throwback shots from your Deal or No Deal days. Look at this." On the massive screen behind them, images flashed of a younger Meghan in a sparkly dress holding briefcase number 24 with a pageant-perfect smile. The audience awed appreciatively, but Meghan's posture had shifted almost imperceptibly, her shoulders slightly higher, her hands clasped tighter in her lap. "I mean, you were gorgeous then, you're gorgeous now, but tell me honestly, when you were standing there with that briefcase, did you ever think, one day I'm going to marry a prince?" The question hung in the air. Meghan laughed, but it was a beat too late. "I think I was mainly thinking about not tripping in those heels," she deflected. From the audience, Carla Simmons, a teacher from Chicago on her dream LA vacation, let out an audible "ooh" that the overhead mics caught perfectly. The sound rippled through the crowd like a small wave. Ellen wasn't deterred. "Come on, you had to have some big dreams. I mean, you were in Hollywood, you were beautiful, talented. What were your real ambitions back then?" "I wanted to work. I wanted to use whatever platform I had to make a difference. That's always been my North Star." But Ellen's eyes had that familiar gleam, the look that made celebrities squirm and audiences lean forward. "Speaking of platforms, we actually found some old interview footage of you from those early days, stuff that never aired. Want to see it?" Jake signaled from the booth. This was it, the moment they'd been building toward. Meghan's smile held, but her knuckles were white where her hands pressed together. "Oh no, I'm sure it's embarrassing." "If you think that was cute, wait until you see what we found next." The studio lights dimmed slightly, and the familiar throwback video music began to play. On the massive screen, grainy footage appeared, clearly from the mid-2000s, with Meghan looking impossibly young in a low-budget interview setting. "So, what's your strategy for making it in Hollywood?" the off-camera interviewer asked. Meghan laughed, tossing her hair. "Strategy? Girl, you have to work every angle. It's about leveraging relationships, being seen with the right people. I mean, talent is great, but visibility is everything. Sometimes you have to play the game to change the game, you know?" The present-day Meghan sat frozen in her chair, watching her younger self continue with casual confidence. "I'm not afraid to use what I've got. A pretty face opens doors, but a smart brain keeps them open. And if wearing the right dress to the right party gets me 5 minutes with someone who can change my career, I'm wearing that dress." The clip ended. The studio fell into an awkward quiet that seemed to stretch forever. Where there had been warm laughter moments before, now there were whispered murmurs and uncertain glances. Ellen turned back to Meghan with that same friendly smile, but her voice carried a new edge. Well, that was honest. Do you still feel that way? Meghan's face had gone through a series of micro-expressions during the clip. Surprise, embarrassment, and finally, a kind of controlled blankness. When she looked back at Ellen, her media mask was firmly in place, but there was steel behind her eyes. "I think," she said carefully, "that young woman was trying to survive in a very difficult industry. Sometimes, survival looks different from the outside than it feels on the inside." From the audience, Carla Simmons could be heard whispering to her neighbor, "Uh-oh, this is getting real." The damage was done. The carefully orchestrated warmth of the first segment had evaporated, replaced by something electric and unpredictable. Ellen leaned back in her chair, studying Meghan like a puzzle she was determined to solve. "There's actually," Ellen paused dramatically, "more." Meghan straightened in her chair, drawing on years of media training and royal composure. Her smile returned, but it was sharper now, more calculated. "You know, Ellen, I think context matters here. That interview was from, 15 years ago? I was a young woman trying to make it in an industry that chews up and spits out people like me every single day." She gestured gracefully, her voice ticking on the measured cadence she'd perfected during her royal years. "We all say things when we're young that we might phrase differently with the wisdom of experience. I've learned, I've grown, I've evolved. That's what human beings do." Ellen nodded, but her expression remained curious, almost innocent. Of course. Growth is beautiful. But you did say those things, and you smiled when you said them. That wasn't nervousness or being put on the spot. That was confidence." A ripple of tension ran through the audience. Carla Simmons shifted in her seat, whispering audibly to her companion, "Uh-oh, she's not letting this go." Meghan's laugh was a fraction too bright. "I think confidence in a young woman is often labeled differently than confidence in a young man, don't you? I knew my worth then, just as I know it now. The only difference is that now I have the platform to use that confidence for something bigger than myself." From the wings, Leo Harrington watched his client with growing concern. He'd seen Meghan handle hostile press before, but this was different. This was live television with no escape route, and Ellen was proving to be more persistent than anticipated. Ellen leaned forward, her voice dropping to a more conspiratorial tone. "Well, since we're talking about confidence and platforms, there's actually more." The studio lights seemed to dim slightly, as if the very air was holding its breath. Meghan's hands, which had been gesturing expressively, now gripped the arms of her chair. The screen flickered to life again, this time showing footage from a charity gala circa 2010. Young Meghan stood at a cocktail reception, wearing an elaborate costume tiara as part of the event's theme. She was caught mid-conversation with someone off camera, clearly unaware she was being filmed. Honestly, half of charity work is just networking with the right people. You wear the right dress, you smile at the right donors, you get your picture taken with the right cause. It's all about building your brand while doing good. Win-win, right? I mean, who knows? Maybe one day I'll get to wear a real one. The present-day studio fell silent, except for the mechanical whir of cameras. Meghan sat perfectly still, her face a mask of controlled composure, but her knuckles had gone white against the chair fabric. Ellen's voice cut through the quiet with deceptive casualness. "Well, that one aged interestingly, didn't it? Do you see any similarities between your approach then and your approach to public life now?" The audience's energy had shifted completely. What had started as entertainment was becoming something more uncomfortable, more invasive. Tasha tried to cue for supportive applause, but it came out forced and scattered. Meghan attempted another deflecting laugh, but it sounded hollow in the charged atmosphere. I think that shows someone who understood early on that visibility can be used for good. The difference between then and now is scale and impact. From the corner of her eye, she caught sight of Leo off stage. He was subtly shaking his head, a signal they'd established years ago. Keep it brief, don't engage, move on. But Ellen wasn't moving on. Well, since we're talking about confidence and platforms, there's actually more. The air in the studio crackled with tension. Even the camera operator seemed to lean in slightly, sensing they were capturing something unscripted and raw. The question hung in the air like smoke, thick and inescapable. Meghan felt the familiar sensation of being cornered, a feeling she'd hoped to leave behind with her royal exit. Her media training warred with her instinct to fight back. "Ellen," she said, her voice carrying a new edge that made several audience members sit up straighter. "I think there's a fundamental difference between leveraging your platform for impact and leveraging situations for personal gain. Everything I do now, my advocacy, my foundation work, my partnerships, they all stem from a genuine desire to create change." Ellen tilted her head with that infuriating casual air. "But isn't that what every public figure says? How do we know the difference between genuine passion and, well," she gestured toward the screen where the charity gala footage had just played, "strategic positioning?" The audience murmured, sensing blood in the water. Carla Simmons let out a surprised, "Ooh," that her neighbor immediately shushed. Meghan's composure cracked just slightly. "You know what? Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we've become so cynical that we can't believe someone might actually want to help people without it being a calculated move." Her voice rose a fraction. "If telling my story authentically, if using my experiences to help other women find their voices is branding, then maybe more women should brand themselves." A few scattered claps came from the audience, but they felt thin in the charged atmosphere. Ellen's eyebrows rose with apparent delight. "That's interesting. Telling your story. Because stories can be edited, can't they? They can be curated, rewritten to fit the narrative you want people to believe?" The subtle accusation hit its mark. Meghan's jaw tightened visibly. "Everyone curates their story, Ellen. The question is whether you're being honest about your journey or trying to pretend it never happened." From his position in the wings, Leo felt his stomach drop. This was spiraling beyond damage control. Jake Morales, watching from the control booth, was practically vibrating with excitement at the real-time drama unfolding. Ellen leaned back with that infuriating casual air that had become her trademark. "Speaking of journeys and honesty, we actually reached out to some people from your past. And you know what? They had some interesting things to say." The studio fell silent. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. The screen came alive once more, but this time it showed a familiar face. Sarah Chen, Meghan's former co-star from a short-lived cable drama. Sarah sat in what appeared to be her home office, speaking directly to the camera with the measured tone of someone who had been carefully coached. Meghan was incredibly talented. She had this natural charisma that just drew people in. But even then, she was very aware of the cameras. She knew exactly where they were at all times, knew her best angles, knew how to position herself to catch the light. Sarah paused, choosing her words carefully. "Look, that's not necessarily a bad thing in our business. You have to be strategic to survive." But Meghan was next-level strategic. She studied not just her lines, but the industry. She knew which producers to charm, which journalists to befriend, which events to attend. She was always thinking 3 moves ahead.
The video ended with Sarah offering a diplomatic smile. She was destined for bigger things. I think we all knew that, even then. The studio was dead quiet. Meghan sat rigid, her breathing carefully controlled, watching Ellen with the intensity of a cat sizing up a threat. Ellen chuckled, that infuriating casual laugh that had become her trademark. Sounds like you were media trained before you even needed to be. That's impressive, actually. Something shifted in Meghan's posture. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted slightly, and when she spoke, her voice carried a new sharpness. Or maybe I just knew my worth in an industry that systematically undervalues women, especially women of color. The audience stirred. This wasn't deflection anymore. This was a counterattack. Maybe, she continued, her eyes never leaving Ellen's face, what looks like strategic, as Sarah saw it, was actually survival. Maybe what looks like calculation from the outside feels like self-preservation from the inside. Ellen's smile remained fixed, but her eyes sharpened with interest. That's a very convenient reframe. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan's last thread of composure snapped. The careful mask she'd maintained throughout the interview cracked, revealing something raw and wounded underneath. Convenient? Her voice rose above the careful modulation she'd maintained. Ellen, I've spent the last 5 years of my life being dissected by people who think they know my motivations better than I do. She leaned forward, no longer the poised guest, but a woman pushed to her limit. You want to talk about my past? Let's talk about it. Yes, I was strategic. Yes, I was ambitious. Yes, I knew that in Hollywood, perception is reality, and if you don't control your narrative, someone else will. The audience was riveted, some leaning forward in their seats. Carla Simmons had stopped whispering entirely, her mouth slightly open as she watched the transformation.
Ellen tried to interject. Meghan, I think we're all just trying to understand. Understand what? Meghan cut her off, her voice gaining power. How a biracial actress from LA figured out how to play a game that was rigged against her from day one? How she learned to smile at people who saw her as disposable? How she had to be twice as good to get half as far? From the wings, Leo took a step forward, then stopped. This was beyond crisis management now. This was catharsis happening in real time, and any intervention would only make it worse. Ellen's expression had shifted from entertained curiosity to something more cautious. She'd pushed plenty of guests over the years, but this felt different. This felt dangerous. The real question, Ellen, Meghan continued, her voice now carrying the full weight of years of suppressed frustration, isn't whether I was strategic then or now. The question is why a woman being intentional about her career is seen as manipulation, while a man doing the exact same thing is called ambitious. The studio air crackled with electricity. Jake, in the control booth, was frantically signaling his camera operators to capture every angle of what was clearly becoming television history. Do you want to know what I'm really running from? Meghan asked, her voice dropping to something more intimate but no less intense. The question hung in the air like a dare. Ellen, for the first time in the interview, seemed genuinely unsure how to respond. The woman across from her was no longer the carefully managed public figure who'd walked onto her stage an hour ago. This was someone operating on pure, unfiltered emotion. I'm running from the version of myself that everyone else wants me to be, Meghan said, her voice steady but charged with years of pent-up frustration. The grateful princess who should have been thankful for the fairy tale? The perfect duchess who never had opinions? The quiet wife who should have been content to wave and smile? She looked directly into the camera, speaking past Ellen to the millions watching at home. I'm running from the narrative that says I should apologize for knowing my worth, for speaking my truth, for refusing to shrink myself to make others comfortable." Ellen opened her mouth to respond, but Meghan held up a hand. "You showed those clips to embarrass me, to prove some point about authenticity versus ambition. But you know what? I'm not embarrassed. That young woman in those videos was doing everything she could to survive and thrive in an industry that chews up people like her. She was learning to use her voice before she even knew what she wanted to say with it." The audience was completely silent now, caught between discomfort and fascination. Even the camera operators seemed to have stilled, as if sudden movement might shatter whatever spell was holding the moment together. "The media wants to reduce me to sound bites, the scheming actress, the social climber, the manipulator. But I'm not a character in someone else's story anymore. I'm writing my own." Carla Simmons' whispered "wow" broke the silence, rippling through the studio like a stone dropped in still water. Ellen sat back in her chair, her professional mask fully on place, but her eyes uncertain. She'd gotten more than she'd bargained for. "Meghan, I think—" "No," Meghan said, quietly, but with finality. "I think we're done here." She stood, her legs slightly unsteady, but her resolve clear. The audience watched in stunned silence as she smoothed her blazer and looked one last time at Ellen. The studio held its breath as Meghan rose from her chair with deliberate grace, every movement watched by dozens of cameras and hundreds of eyes. Her blazer fell perfectly into place, her posture straight despite the emotional earthquake that had just shaken the soundstage. "Thank you for having me, Ellen. I hope this was enlightening." Ellen remained seated, caught between her professional instincts and genuine surprise. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. For perhaps the first time in her decades-long career, she was truly speechless. Meghan turned toward the audience, offering them a small, sad smile. "Thank you all for listening. Really listening." Then, without another glance at Ellen or the cameras, she walked toward the exit with measured steps that echoed in the silent studio. Carla Simmons materialized from the wings, falling into step beside her client as they disappeared into the backstage shadows. His face was a mask of professional calm, but his eyes betrayed the storm of damage control already brewing in his mind. The audience sat frozen for a moment, unsure how to react. Then, slowly, scattered applause began, tentative at first, then building. Some clapped supportively, others uncertainly, a few not at all. Carla Simmons was on her feet, clapping enthusiastically, tears streaming down her face. Ellen finally found her voice, turning to face the camera with a smile that was equal professional recovery and genuine admiration. "Well," she said, her tone carefully modulated, "that was unexpected. Meghan Markle, everyone." She paused, letting the weight of what had just happened settle over the studio. "We'll be right back after these messages." Jake frantically signaled from the control booth, and the cameras cut away. In the sudden release of tension, the audience erupted into chatter, phones emerging like flowers in spring as everyone tried to capture their piece of television history. Ellen sat alone on her stage, still processing what had just unfolded, knowing that in minutes the internet would be on fire with clips, memes, and think pieces about the interview that became a reckoning. The show would go on, but something had fundamentally shifted. Meghan had chosen herself over the performance, truth over comfort, and in doing so had created a moment that would be dissected and debated long after the studio lights dimmed.